continues. We're now joined by ESPN senior writer Chris Lowe, who has been all over the Alabama story from the Saban retirement to everything since. And Chris, thank you for your time. Paul Craig and David Smoak here on 365 Sports. So what would you say, what would you describe the mood right now inside that football office at Alabama?
Inside the office or the fans? I'd say inside the office, it's basically that there's not enough hours in the day. You know, as far as trying to add some guys in the transfer portal, make sure you're still keeping as many as you can from leaving, finishing up the staff, just trying to put your infrastructure in as quickly as you can. And I would say that there's 24 hours in a day. I would say probably if you're Catalina DeBoer right now, you wish there were 40 hours a day. There's just not enough time to do everything he's got to do.
Chris, I mean, this is the most seismic thing to happen to college football in the coaching circles, maybe ever, in the way that it's reverberated based on the rules now. Was there any push by Alabama to try to keep him there so they didn't have to do this coaching search? Or was it just all right, well, we knew this day was coming. Unfortunately, it's today.
No, it was his decision. He thought about this the last couple of years and gone about through this process with his wife. Was it time? Was it not time? And I think as they discussed it after the season this year, he felt like it was time to get out. He would have been 73 next football season. The wear and tear on this year and last year, as you get to that age, took its toll on him because Nick Saban is just not going to do it but one way, and that's all the way. He doesn't know. He would not have been able to sort of, scale back a little bit and be more of a CEO. That's just not the way he's wired. So I think the AD, Greg Byrne, had some notice that this was probably it after the season. So he had a working list that he was able to start with. But no, I mean, you're not going to, when he decides that it's time for him to walk away, you're not going to talk him out of it. And but any good AD, listen, when you got a guy like Saban who's just finished his 17th year, he's 72, he's going to be prepared for this. You can't just wait and say, okay, we're going to start from scratch. So I think he had a list of guys that probably he had worked on, edited a little bit over the last couple of years. So when this day did inevitably come, he'd be ready to start. I think that's what happened with Byrne. He was gone that day, later that night. And I know he had, 3-4 names right there on his list that he wanted to work off of.
Just got some breaking news here. As a matter of fact, Alabama, Catalina DeBoer picked up a commit from Washington transfer quarterback Austin Mack. So that just becoming a piece of news here down the line. So Alabama picks up a quarterback from his old stomping grounds. Chris, if this were college football of old, which it's not, but if it were, would Saban still have a few more years left in him, not having to deal with the portal or NIL or any of those things, or is that overblown?
I think that was a factor. It wasn't the factor. He does, he's made it pretty clear he's not crazy about this version of college football. Just the lack of uniformity, really. Not the fact that kids are getting paid, but having to re-recruit your own guys and runners and agents and attorneys, trying to shop guys from one school to the next, out of the portal, in the portal. That's the part he didn't like. And I think, and I think if you talk to most coaches, really 98.7% of coaches are going to tell you the same thing. But I think it was more a combination of he just felt like it was time to go, time to hand it over to somebody else. As I said a minute ago, it had taken its toll on him. And he wanted to leave, two things. He wanted to leave when the program was still in good shape and not dipping and not taking on water. Well, he might have been one of his better coaching jobs this year. And they're an overtime win from getting to the national championship game. I think the second thing is when he walked away, and he's told me this in the past, he wanted to have enough quality of life that he could go out and do some things, he and his family and his wife, Terry, that he simply hasn't had time to do, that his quality of life was good enough to be able to do those things. And I think that certainly factored into his decision as well.
Chris, was Jimmy Sexton unfairly criticized for having all of these candidates that would probably be the ones contacted when Nick Saban retired?
Well, I mean, criticized, I would say probably if you're in that world, you're an agent,
That's what you
probably be a
want. Yeah.
compliment.
Now it's a compliment.
Yeah,
Yeah. Now, but
That's probably a compliment that,
Yeah.
that you've got all those guys, and he's been that guy. That whether it's Sarkisian, whether it's Saban, whether it's DeBoer, Mike Norvell, Lane Kiffin, all those guys are his guys. And he had that one day. Sarkisian got a raise, Norvell got a raise. DeBoer goes from Washington to Alabama with a raise. It's probably going to double what he was making at Washington. So, I mean, that's the money now the coaches are making is pretty insane. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that, but that's sort of the market. And when you look at college football now, and I always advise people close to me, fans, friends, family, love your school, love your program, root for your school, root for your program, but know that the game has changed, that the players and the coaches aren't necessarily going to love you back all the time, because there's ability now to go and make a lot of money if you're a coach. And if you're a player, you got chances now to go from school to school and get bigger deals. And that's sort of what we're seeing now in college football.
Other than replacing the legend, which we've always heard about, don't be the one that does, be the one that replaces the one who did. But with the NIL that Saban and Alabama had set up, is that now a problem because there was a discount with Saban being the head coach?
Well, I know they got to continue to build that. I know that's the priority now in Alabama, to continue to build that collective, because there's no mistake in the fact that when kids come on campus or they're transferring, they want to know what kind of deal they can get. And, Nick was always let's divvy it up sort of as evenly as we can. That's just sort of the generation, his school of coaching he came from. And that's not the way it really works anywhere else now. I mean, your quarterbacks are going to cost more, edge rushers are going to cost more. But no, I think that is a priority now in Alabama. Not that Alabama had fallen way behind. I mean, they still, the last couple of years, were able to get great players. They got a couple of key transfers. The recruiting classes were good. But yes, absolutely. Kids wanted to play for Nick Saban. Two reasons. Number one, his teams have won every single year and played for championships. And maybe more importantly, every kid that the Alabamas of the world, the USCs, the Texases, the Ohio States, the Michigans, every one of those kids thinks they're going to play in the NFL. Now, we know that the percentages say that that's far from the truth. So where they want to go? They want to go to a place that has, or a coach who has a proven track record of producing a lot of NFL draft picks. And Nick's, what's the stat? He's got more NFL first rounders, like double the number of first rounders he's produced in losses his entire career at Alabama. So those are the skins on the wall for him. And that's why kids want to come play, because he had set them up for success. And, probably something that's not talked enough about is his graduation rate among players was among the highest in college football as well.
Chris, you mentioned Jimmy Sexton and getting all those guys raises. And part of being a great agent is getting your client a raise even when they're not necessarily up for a job. They could be theoretically up for it because college football, has to work that way. How many of those guys actually did talk to Greg Byrne and interview?
Well, Norvell definitely did. There was definitely contact and conversations there. And I think from the get-go, I was told it would be one of those two guys, DeBoer or Norvell. Both of those are Sexton clients. Sarkisian is absolutely a guy that would have been on the list and should have been on the list. But he was, at the end of the day, Steve's not leaving Texas to go to Alabama. I mean, he's already making a ton of money. He's got a great roster. And Texas is moving into the SEC next year. So why do you want to go in and replace that guy when you're already at Texas? You're at a Rolls Royce. So, I mean, yeah, he got a raise, but I never thought and never talked to anybody who felt like he was going to leave Texas. Those were sort of the main three guys. And everybody, I mean, I never thought Lane Kiffin was a candidate. Dabo Sweeney is not a Jimmy Sexton. Never thought he was a main candidate. And Dan Lanning's the other one in Oregon. Dan had a $22 million buyout. And, he'd only been at Oregon for 2 years. I don't think he ever was really on that list either, because he just wasn't realistically at that point going to leave Oregon to go to Alabama. And you're right. You want to be the guy that replaces the guy, and that's the guy that replaces the guy. And a lot of guys just weren't raising their hand and signing up for that. Kalen DeBoer was. And I think being that secure in his own skin to go in there and tackle that challenge has resonated with a bunch of the kids on his team. Not all of them, because some of them have jumped in the portal, but some of the ones I've talked to certainly aren't blind to the fact that their coach is a guy that was in the national championship game last year, but was ready to take on this challenge of going in behind a legend, and not everybody's ready to do that.
Chris, this may be a silly question. I think everybody on this show has broken a story at some level, a time or two. You've obviously broken a lot of big stories over the years, but when your tweet first came out, I think I joined everybody in America of like, all right, is that the real Chris Lowe? Just making sure the username wasn't something else. But you had to have realized at the time you were about to heave a salvo out there in the college football world, but what was it like just to break that story, have that waiting, and know what was about to take place as you press send there?
Yeah, I got several calls, several text messages saying, "Hey, is this you? Is this legit?" So, unfortunately, in the social media world, we all have to deal with that now. Sort of the fake accounts or bogus accounts on social media. But no, I knew what how that was going to just absolutely go viral. And hey, it's Nick Saban, the guy that's, I don't know in our lifetime we'll ever see anybody, and it may be a long time, have that type of run. So I understood and was certainly cognizant of the fact that the college football world was really getting ready to be turned upside down when I got the news from two people I trusted that he had indeed retired and told his team. That's the thing I think that I would add is, Nick's such an old school guy that he 100%, 1,000% did not want that to get out before he told his team. And I found out literally right after he told his team, he was not going to do anything or say anything to anybody that would potentially jeopardize that. He wanted to be the one in a team meeting with all his guys there and telling, "Hey guys, I'm retiring," before they read it, on the internet or on the website or social media. And it's rare now that coaches are able to do that because the immediacy of everything. People talk, kids are on Twitter, they're texting their buddies. Somebody in the football complex is texting somebody because they've heard it. So to me, that was the accomplishment of all accomplishments. You talk about who broke the story, but the fact that he was able to tell his players before it got out there publicly is pretty amazing in this day and age.
Not sure if you won't know this story, but Jalen Milroe was on his way flying into Texas to Tyler for the Earl Campbell Tyler Rose Award. He was a finalist, and obviously that changed things. That got interrupted because I don't know if he was in mid-flight or was about to leave or not, but that did change some things. That says a lot about you, not just to scratch your back, but that says a lot about you that you had those kind of sources, and that's what we work for, that would give you that kind of information for then you to do your due diligence that was available to you.
Well, I mean, I'm fortunate. I've done this for a long time, and I've had a chance over the last 30-some years to get to know a lot of people and cover ball. I covered the NFL for a while. I covered college football, and guys sort of come up through the ranks, and you get to know them when they're assistants. You maintain those relationships. I feel sorry for the people that are covering college football right now, the younger folks, because it's harder than ever to really be able to get in and know guys and establish relationships because, covering all these big time schools, it's almost like covering the Kremlin. You can't get in to talk to anybody. Just a handful of players are made available every week, selected players. There's not a lot of one-on-one sit downs. So, relationships. And again, I call myself very fortunate, very blessed that a lot of these guys now that I cover, I've known for a long time and got to know them back during a time when we could actually talk to assistants.
Yep.
You could talk to coaches after practice. You got to know them, sit down with them, spend some time, go to lunch with them in the summer. Those days are over.
No kidding. Yeah. Your story today, to wrap it up, and thanks for your time, about the players who are not running from the change, who have not entered the portal, the ones who want to remain there to help keep that standard and believe, because of what you mentioned, DeBoer did not run from this job. He accepted it and wants to thrive in it. They have lost a lot, but they're going to gain a few things. What about a coach that when he leaves the program can lose their roster, and yet that program really, because of the timeline of semesters and the transfer portal, kind of can get stuck without being able to fill up some of those spots until maybe April or whenever?
That's just where we are, guys, in the sport. And it's no different anywhere. I mean, if Kirby Smart announces tomorrow that he's going to go take the Atlanta Falcons head coaching job, same thing would happen in Georgia, especially when it's a coach of that stature. a coach that has won, a coach that kids want to go play for. Basketball is a little bit different. You know, Krzyzewski announced his retirement, and he coached the whole year in hoops. But in football, look at what happened at Washington. A bunch of guys are bolting at Washington after DeBoer left there, and Arizona. Same thing in Arizona with the Jed Fish leaving Arizona to go to Washington, because there's a 30-day window for all schools. If your coach leaves, that you have a chance to transfer. And I know a lot of people don't like that. I mean, if you look at it from all the different perspectives for a kid, you know, you say, well, okay, he ought to have at least to have a chance if his coach leaves. But for the program, you know, yes, it can be crippling. It's very, very difficult. But that's just sort of where we are. And kids can go where they want to play. They don't have to sit out like they used to. And now it's multiple times you can transfer. And everybody says, well, where we're headed, I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But clearly there's got to be, at some point, some uniformity that takes into account the entire program, the kids' needs, and their best interests. Because I don't feel sorry for the coaches. So those guys are making a ton of money.
Yep.
Now, they have contracts, they have buyouts. There's ramifications if they leave. I mean, as I said, if Lanning left, it would have cost him or whoever was hiring him $22 million. I think DeBoer's buyout was $12 million. So those are real dollars and cents. So they do have contracts, but yeah, I mean, I don't know how it is, how it works out. I don't know that I have a lot of confidence that Congress is going to fix things. But it's something that if you don't adapt and you don't evolve, you don't figure out a way to deal with it and spend most of your time complaining and belly aching about it, then you're probably not going to be able to sort of be up and stay up with the time.
Chris, great stuff. Thank you so much for being a part of our show.
Hey, anybody that knows Dave Wilson, I'm always wanting to go on their show.
Oh, yeah. He and I used to cover JUCO basketball in East Texas together at some gyms that, of course, have a great history. But thank you for checking on that. Chris, thank you so much. Dave's a great friend, too, and with you at ESPN. Chris Lowe, ESPN, broke the Nick Saban story and has also been all over the coaching changes and search and DeBoer and more. One of the